Hey everybody, this is Benjamin Morse, comic book artist, coming to you from high atop Bear Mountain. And I wanted to put together a quick video on how to make a comic book if you're not an artist, and in what situations that might be a good idea to consider. So it's always frustrating whether you're a writer, artist, any type of creative person, if you have a great idea, but for some reason you gotta wait to be able to do it. It's also, this is comic specific, really tough just to get things going. It's hard to get editors to take a look at your work. It's hard to get, if you're a writer, to get artists to take a look at your script. So as an artist, I've always thought we had easy in a sense that someone only has to spend a second or two seeing what level our work is at. If you're a writer, it's a heavier time and effort investment to read even a short script. And then you're stuck making something, sort of a hook story and not necessarily focusing on what the strongest part or aspect of your story is. Something that's cool in like a 30-second elevator pitch is not necessarily a cool TV episode for an hour or a 2 hour movie. So, there's just a real mismatch in the type of work you want to create and what it takes to even be in a position to possibly do it. On top of that, and again, this is a comics thing, what an artist needs to draw to get noticed, to go to the next step in their career, is not necessarily the things that are going to get you as a writer to the next step in your career. There's a lot of writers that are super dialogue focused and write great stuff, but the artists don't necessarily get the same bump in their career out of producing that type of work. So there's just a really kind of drastic mismatch there. It's nobody's fault. That being said, it would really suck to have a great script idea and you got to spend years waiting to save up to hire an artist, waiting for the right artist to come along, waiting for your schedules to work out. I mean, life's just too short for that stuff. So I'd say that given a lot of the stuff that's out there now as a writer, you probably have some options to make some things happen for your story if you're not in a spot where you can hire an artist, where you can get the artist you want. You don't necessarily have to wait. You can, if you're a little creative and are willing to spend some time getting just a little bit of technical knowledge down. So I thought it might be cool to see how far I could get, what kind of nuances I could get out of a story with just pre-existing assets that I get from a stock site. So my day job, I do graphic design, animation, video editing, and I use a stock site called Envato. I'm not really shilling for them. I think there's a lot of the ones out there that would do pretty much what that does, but they've got a ton of resources. That's fonts, music, sound effects, graphic resources, graphic templates, things like that. So I thought, what if I took the graphic templates we have there with some minimal editing and see what kind of detail, nuanced story stuff I can get out of it. This is something I put together. The dialogue is from an issue of We Are Scarlet Twilight. So I'm going to throw up on screen now. My little logo there. It's just there for placement to, indicate that we're leaving room for bubbles. That being said, I wasn't going to sit down and write a whole story for this, but I did want to do something that shows some panel to panel elements being consistent and is basically just giving you some real, panel comic book storytelling. So we have an establishing shot here. Found this character, this other character. I think you'll figure out as this goes on kind of who these people roughly are. Sort of existing characters. They're just taking this one pose, more or less. I can get some pretty decent variation out of it. And this is something that, as I'm drawing pages, I'm trying to do more. If you look at people who are just pure artists and people who are cartoonists, as comic book artists, it's easy to get kind of hung up on drawing. You look at some cartoonists, they tell a whole story without drawing a character from like any other angle but the main one you see them at. And in a lot of ways, that forces you to make the characters bigger, smaller, mix up your page layout in ways that, while the drawing itself is not as dynamic, the page layout is more dynamic. And it's something I've been trying to focus on in my work. So here we see this thing I put together with just stock characters like this. I just threw a few of them back there. We have a city that was from a stock resource. Mixing up this guy here. I had a different file that had some expressions I've been using. So we have, we can establish these guys are related. They're talking to each other. This girl has a phone. They are kind of annoyed with one another. He's saying something. There's lightning happening. We can get an overhead shot of the city, show there's lightning coming down. I think you can figure out who this guy is and what he was saying here. While this is not necessarily the type of story I think would work well with this approach, I wanted to take existing characters so that I wasn't just falling into the trap of, because it'd be real easy to do, just shape my story to the graphics I'm able to find. Um, I have a character here who we kind of know what his deal is. He has to say something, lightning happens, it turns him into a different guy. So I had to mesh, I had to take artwork I could find and make it fit very specific actions we're familiar with, just to kind of test out how well this approach might work in telling a story, and not just say finding some graphic resource and saying, oh, what can I do with this, and shaping your story to fit that, because that's not really a great approach. So we see a splash panel here. We're picking up some of the characters from the initial page, so that they're consistently appearing there. We still have this character here. They're in roughly the same position. We can show that maybe they were arguing over who gets to go deal with whatever situation they're going to go deal with. So I have that there, pretty simple. And also took that background character with his cell phone. He's like, great, I'm going to get a picture of Captain Marvel. And his cell phone fritzes out from the lightning. No, I don't think that's a great scene. Let me zoom out so you can see the whole page here. And then we go to a page of him flying to the Rock of Eternity. The reason I did this is to show that we could get like kind of a bit out of these resources. I could kind of take this character, make him happy, show why he's happy, show what goes wrong for him, show him being annoyed, and why he's annoyed as Captain Marvel's flying away. Also, I wanted to show an establishing shot of another scene, because the Rock of Eternity is kind of an existing graphic element that we're used to seeing in comics. So it couldn't just be like, oh, I found this mountain that doesn't really look like the other mountain, but I'm going to pretend it does. I had to find resources, the graphics that I wasn't going to draw by myself, and see if they could fit, some very narrow specifications that we're used to seeing. So I think this was a pretty successful experiment. Now, I don't think this artwork would look good for everything. You look at murals that are in, like, say, a restaurant or something like that. That's kind of the artwork we're seeing here. But I think for stuff that's kind of children's book sort of looking things that are funnier, things that are more down to earth, this style would work out pretty well. Now, if nothing else, it would at least be something where if you're a writer and you're trying to get your work looked at, you could say, hey, it's hard to get somebody to read a script, but if you put together something like this, and this is with minimal illustrator effort, everything, even coming in cold, you could learn to do everything I do to get these graphics into this layout in a day. There's like 5 things I'm doing here. It's not complicated. I'd say an afternoon's worth of YouTube videos, you'd be set. You'd be able to do everything I've done here. You can get these resources that have a lot of different options for angles and things like that. It'll help you keep your characters consistent. And not to get too far into that, but what I was saying earlier is, if you're a writer and you want somebody to look at your script, giving them this as opposed to just something from that screenwriting program people use or whatever that's called, or a Word document, is a much easier sell. It indicates you're a little more committed. You've thought about how things work in a visual story, how comic books work. This isn't the right approach for everything. There's always going to be some limitations, but I was surprised at how much detail and things I was able to get across using this method. So everything I've done here, if you were to, I'm working in Adobe Illustrator. I think there are even free alternatives to Adobe Illustrator. But for this, I think Adobe costs $35 a month. The stock site I'm pulling resources from and altering them slightly to get what we have here is, I want to say 30 something a month. So that's, $60 around there. Certainly not nothing. But when you compare it to the huge cost of saving up to hire an artist, that might be worth considering. And if nothing else, I think on my last video, I saw a comment about my AI stuff. A writer said, hey, just doing this, I messed around with it. It wasn't entirely successful, but it improved my communication with my artists so much. That's a huge thing. And I think that's always going to make your story stronger. So hope you've enjoyed this. Please keep checking out the channel. Subscribe. We're going to have a lot more stuff like this. Other things are, I have my comic out, August, Purgatory Underground from Red 5 Comics. I think the 4th issue is in previews now for pre-order. So ask your local comic book store to order it for you. That would be awesome. Finishing up the last issue of We Are Scarlet Twilight pretty soon. I'm just coloring up number 3 here. And that should be done this week. Like I said, please keep checking out the channel, and thanks for checking out this video.